And what I think should be number one is actually number 6 on the bottom. It's good housekeeping for the municipalities, and I always figure they should be setting an example instead of doing it last. Public education and outreach, of course, is all your brochures, public meetings, working with contractors. That all fits into your public education and outreach time. I've asked several regulators to speak, and I apologized one guy for asking him so many times, and he said that's no problem because it fills my public education outreach requirement of my NPDES permit. Illicit discharge detection and elimination. You start out with your storm sewer maps, your ordinances. About everybody has an ordinance that says you don't dump anything but rain down in the storm drain, but as a general rule they do not specifically address power washing, so that's one of the things that we'll be talking about. And we'll be going over the BMPs. Most municipalities have chosen to have either fact sheets or BMPs and not specific ordinances. The reason most of them give me is that so they can change them rather rapidly from one time to the next, to where if they had an ordinance it would take quite a bit of effort to make those changes. All communities should have ordinance against anything but rain down the drain. Very few have specific cosmetic cleaning ordinance, and we'll go over those. Most municipalities and urban areas have BMPs and fact sheets. The target dates for completion for the first 5-year plan, we're just now coming to the end of it, so most of them will be ended up in 2008, 9, and 10. And about everybody is getting ready to rethink about going for their second 5-year plan, and that will include cosmetic cleaning ordinances. In case you don't know, a lot of the NPDES permits, the municipalities were trying to give a lot of raw data to the EPA instead of condensing it. I know I looked at one NPDES permit, and both of these cities are over 1 million. One of them was about 1/4 inch thick, the other was about 6 inches thick. And they said, well, it was almost a foot thick. They felt like if they get them all this raw data, they wouldn't have an audit. About 30 days ago in one of these training sessions, the EPA said they was going to start rejecting those things where they're trying to snow them with garbage. And basically they said the phase 1s were going to have an audit every 5 years. The phase 2s were going to have an audit every 7 years. So that was the audit schedule that they're fixing to come out with. That was on one of those training sessions about 30 days ago. Phase 2 sources of illicit discharge detection and elimination: car washing, power washing, wastewater, and laundry wastewater are things that are called out in that you'll need to be looking for, and we'll talk about some detection on those in a little later. Typical power washing pollutants are fats, oil, and grease, and detergents with solvents, heavy metals, and other things less often. Phase 2 biggest problem was construction sites, which was their #1 priority, which I noticed most of these meetings, and for the last 5 years, most of these type meetings have all been around that lane, which means that the enforcement of cosmetic cleaning has been rather low, and it's slowly going to start increasing, and it's been real spotty from one Phase 2 area to the next. EPA's responsibility. The EPA does not provide written endorsements of products, processes, or technology. The EPA's responsibilities are directed at setting specific discharge objectives that dischargers must meet. The EPA sets the standards. Detergents and stuff like that for cosmetic cleaning are not EPA approved. So the biggest problem we have in there is vendors that sell the contractors a product that's biodegradable, and they assume that means it goes down into the storm drain. Biodegradability is a degree of its ability for it to go through the POTW. It doesn't have anything to do with being discharged to the storm drain. That's probably the biggest mistake in the industry. The cities, the urban areas determine what processes, products, and technologies that they're going to use to meet the discharge limits that are set down by the EPA or the state agency if that's been designated, which means the rules will vary from city to city and sometimes within site to site within the same city. Your NPDES requirements, you have dry weather field screens, DWFS. Now, when I was through an Opens Records request, I requested a lot of this data for this presentation. What I found out was that the NPDES permits are not general permits that the urban areas municipality has, but they're all specific. So some communities are measuring detergents in their storm drains for the dry weather field screens, and some of them are measuring fats, oil, and greases. And the people I talked to that were measuring FOGs thought everybody did FOGs, and the people I talked to that did detergents thought everybody did detergents. And most of them didn't do both. They did one or the other, which made it difficult to evaluate these regulations because I was trying to look at the implementation time versus the effect that it had on the FOGs or the detergent into the storm drains. And there's no standard on detection limits. So basically they were reporting whatever their technology had. So if one city was a little higher technology than the other city, they could detect detergents at a lower concentration than what the other city, which made it even harder. I keep hitting that. Which made it even harder to compare. So I had to use some judgment decisions and a lot of this stuff. So the conclusions, anything that's close, you couldn't say one is better than the other. Just as a trivia, some communities took an open record request real serious, and then I found out there's only a certain length of time that they had to respond, and other cities just ignored it. They didn't pay any attention to it at all, which I thought was kind of curious. A city is responsible for its combined total discharge of the wastewater in these screens. What I found out that certain contractors had gotten exemptions to discharge into the storm drains from the municipalities. What the regional, state, and federal regulators said was no matter what the contractor got from a municipality or urban area, if they could discharge into the to the storm sewer, that was not a release of reliability if they caused problems in like state waters or regional waters. In other words, when it passed out of the municipal jurisdiction and went into the regional or state jurisdiction, if there was some pollution that was caused, although they discharged under the municipal permit that allowed it, it still didn't release. They still were not releases from liability. And of course, probably all you guys know that a city can either treat all their storm water or they can just treat the sanitary water. Most people just treat the sanitary water because of economies. It's a lot cheaper to do that than discharge all of their sanitary water and their storm water in a combined sewer system. Now, certain areas of St. Louis, Indianapolis, Sacramento, and San Francisco, as example of the cities that treat all of their wastewater. Generally, it's got some environmental solution or problem, like in St. Louis, where the water runs along the riverway. They treat all their sanitary water and their storm water goes through their POTW so it doesn't go into that river. So when a contractor is working in that area, they encourage him to discharge into the storm sewer because it's all captured. So the discharge location that a contractor goes to, he's going to have some idea of where that storm water is going, whether it's going directly into the storm drain or whether it's actually going into the sanitary sewer system. So it's got some local variations that affect that also. Nothing down the drain but rain, basically. A person commits an offense, if they do that. The EPA has granted certain exemption to this rule, and various cities have enacted specific exemptions in their area. So there's all sorts of exemptions of stuff that can go down into the storm drain. Basically, what the EPA allows, if it's not a significant contributor of pollutants to the storm drain, they all allow it to go down into the storm drain.